In this video, I'm going to use AutoCAD to design this double woven press button. So you'll see this is the back, this is the front. It's a plain woven swatch with a little tunnel of double weave that's inverted in the center. And there's conductive integrated into the top and bottom layers, but they're two different conductive materials. And when you push them together, they close the circuit and form a push button. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and just start by filling this entire screen. First, I'm going to hide the shafts because they sometimes get in the way. And I'm going to fill this whole structure with tabby because ultimately we're starting with tabby on the top and bottom. Now, next I'm going to actually define my materials. So color one, here I'm actually using, oh gosh, I believe it was a 10 to, no, it was like a 5 to black pearl cotton. Okay, and then the next material was a 5 to cream pearl cotton. So those were my base materials. And let's make this kind of creamy. And the other materials I used were two different conductive strands. So we'll leave one of those as this green, and we'll add another one, and maybe in the theme of Easter or something, we'll make it pink. This will be our second conductive strand. Oops, you know what? I went in there and I did not define it as conductive. And if I don't define it in conductive, we won't see it in the circuit view. Okay, so I'll call this bottom conductive. Okay, and maybe I'll just give this a more meaningful name, like top conductive. Okay, so now I'm going to just set up the basic pattern. So that's where I use this actions. So in the warp and weft, we just have two systems. We have a top layer and a bottom layer. So I'll go ahead and push that. And you'll see that if I zoom in, that it switched these labels to AB, AB. Then my colors alternate black, white, black, white, black, white. So I'll push those as well. Now we have some more funky bits going on in the weft angle, but the most commonly used color in the weft is going to be black. So I'm just going to go ahead and push everything to black to start. And then because we're using a double weave, but because we're also using two different conductive materials on two different layers, I'm going to use every single one of these weft systems. And I'm just going to push them in order. Okay, so to start, let's maybe zoom back a bit. If I'm looking at this right now, let's say my conductive systems are going to be on C and D. So I'm going to go ahead and hide C and D, which is nice in that if I look without C and D, my plain weave structure still holds. So that's great. But I'm also seeing that it's not quite as long as I would want it to be. So I can actually expand this out by pushing the plus sign here or cloning the rows, but an easier way to do that is to go to loom settings and to just describe how many weft ends I have. And since I have 4 systems, I want it to be a multiple of 4. And I'm forgetting what multiples of 4 are, but I know 120 is a multiple of 4. So I'll go ahead and start there. Okay, so now I'm going to start again by just designing that base fabric. So I'm going to go in and select. Here we go. And I'm going to make that plain, or yeah, sorry, plain weave. Okay, and then because C and D are my conductive layers, I don't want anything on them right now. I don't want there to be any stitches assigned. I want those to be blank slates. So I'm just gonna kind of erase them out. So if I go back and look at my complete draft, it actually looks something like this. Oh, and I see an error. It's actually missing. You know why that is? Because after I added those warp rows, I didn't update this. So I'm going to go update that and do it again. So again, homemade system, maybe not the most robust, but I hope it at least gets some of the concepts across. So I'll go in here, fill with tabby, go back up, and erase out all those. Okay, now the second thing I'm going to design is this sort of tunnel here in the middle. And that tunnel is double woven, which means that it's on two layers, it's kind of hollow. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this to start and say, okay, maybe I want this whole region to be created in that double weave. Okay, so now we have to see if our systems and our materials are lining up because we're showing A and B here, but we actually haven't assigned materials yet to the wefts. So I'm going to go ahead and show all the wefts, which goes, if I'm not mistaken, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. And I'm going to push the same pattern of colors. So I'm going to say A is black, B is cream, C is, let's see if it gives it to me here, top conductive, and D is bottom conductive. Okay. So does that actually square up with what we needed it to be? So I'm going to go ahead and hide our conductive systems again and look at visual mode. And visual mode shows me that yes, it looks like all my black interlacements are lined up and all my white interlacements are lined up. So I'll look at the back too. Okay, and that kind of squares because, oh, you know what we did here? Interesting. Okay, let's go back. So if we look at the actual swatch here, you'll see that before the row, I only weave with black. I don't actually use black and white. So that means that I'm actually just going to go into my white system here and just fill in the areas black before it gets to that double woven region. So let's do that. Okay. Now if I look at it and actually hide, okay. Yeah, so that's actually how it looks. That's better. Okay, so now we have something that looks more like this, but the noticeable difference is this has this kind of switched region in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and design that switched region in. And I can get that switched region by inverting the double weave. So let me zoom in here. I'm going to go ahead and do this in the draft just because it's easier for me to see. And oops, I did something dumb. I'm going to undo. Great. Here we go. Oops. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to hit select. I'm going to come in and select this region here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this button down here that says invert. And now I just want to double check that that actually has the visual effect I'm desiring. And yes, it does. It kind of flips the white to black. It flips the layers in that region. And so again, I can just look at the top layer, or this is the bottom layer actually, and hide those floating warps. or I can just look at the top layer. Okay, so now we're going to get to the interesting bit where we actually add in um, our conductive components. And so what's going to happen is we want one of those components on a top layer and one of those components on a bottom layer. And it's helpful that we specified the layers with different colors so we can kind of tell that in the button region, black is top and white is bottom. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and actually I'll go back to the draft view. I'm going to zoom in and then I'm going to select this region that's alternated. Okay, I'm having some funny mirroring issues. Oh, let me go ahead and select that again. Okay, so I'm looking at systems A and B. What I want to do now is impose that same structure on systems C and D. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to change what parts of the draft are visible, and I am now just going to go ahead and paste it back in. And so you'll see I actually copied the pattern from one layer and put it on another. Okay, so now we have this very strange looking draft, but if we hide these, we see our base layers. And if we hide these, we see where our conductive section is in the middle. Now let's go into circuit mode to see what that actually looks like with all um, the components shown. So I'm actually going to zoom out a bit. Okay. So yeah, it does look like we have two different systems on two different layers. Now what we would want to do is push one of those systems so we can get a connector out to one side and another system out to another side. So again, I'll zoom in here. And if we look, our pink yarn here comes in from the left. So on this pink row, I'm going to just draw in some interlacements so it kind of comes all the way out to the left-hand side here. And that way I can connect to it from the left. Over here, I see that my green yarn extends out to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and use this interlacement tool to pull this all the way out to the right as well. Okay, and there you have it. We have a double woven press button. We can go back to our visual view or our draft view. And again, you'll see that the draft doesn't look exactly like the pattern. And that's usually the case in weaving. But if we look here, we at least get a sense of our materials being on different layers. So these are on this two layers, and if we go back, we have the other ones on the other two layers. So we can see the actual pink material on the back side. With all the layers showing, you still get kind of a sense it's a little bit more jumbled. And so that's why I like hiding them out when I'm doing double woven kinds of things. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching.